panel to you. As a reminder to those online, if you'd like to ask a question, just pop that question into the Q&A for you, and we'll get to it when we get to our question session. But first, we're going to have our panelists speak to you for a few minutes and talk about their research, and then we'll open the floor to questions.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you so much, Liza. My name is Soraya Faruqi, and I'm the Director of Communications for University Space Research Association, which is a Washington-based organization focused on advancing space science and technology. Now, the topic of our briefing, as Liza had mentioned, is from pixels to Earth action, operationalizing geospatial AI foundation models. And so we've got a great panel today. Dr. David Bell from University Space Research Association's Research Institute for Advanced Computer Science. And Dr. Bell is the director of this institute. And then we also have Dr. Sujit Roy, the AI lead of the NASA Impact team at Marshall Space Center, Flight Center. And joining these two is Ms. Disha Shindle, and she is the data scientist at University Space Research Association's REACS at Ames Research Center. And she also works with David Bell. And I would, just a housekeeping thing, I just want you to make sure that you hold your questions till after all the panelists have spoken. Okay, thank you so much. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, David.
Thank you. I'll give a little introduction. Sujit will dive deep into some of the recent geospatial AI foundation model work that's being recognized this year at AGU. And Disha will give you one detailed use case. So, next slide, please. So the overall mission of our institute is to do advanced Earth AI and space AI for the benefit of humanity. We're a nonprofit. Next slide, please. You may not know much about University Space Research Association, but we have a storied history. We were founded in 1969 at the request of the head of NASA to the head of the National Academy of Sciences. Man was first putting foot on the moon. They wanted an association of universities to help coordinate research, development, and education among industry, academia, and government. They didn't want a single university or university system to do that because they might bias the access towards that university system. They wanted an association, so we were formed. Our first institute was the Lunar Planetary Institute in Houston, which is still there and operating. And we also then have our Computer Science Institute, REACS. We have an Space Institute, Science Technology Institute, many other types of institutes. And that's where we organize our involvement of industry, academia, and government. We happen to be a non-governmental organization observer for the United Nations for climate as well. Just had some events at COP30 this year. Next. So REACS, I like to put this one up just part of our history because it really surprises people. When Ronald Reagan was president of the United States, he sent the annual Space and Aeronautics Report of the President to the US Congress in 1983. And in that report, he wrote, industry is making rapid advances in supercomputing technology, human-computer interfaces, and artificial intelligence. This is important to aerospace, and as a result, was making a major commitment to establish this independent research institute for advanced computer science, REACS, operated by USRA, our organization, at NASA's Ames Research Center in Silicon Valley. And so we've been infusing AI operationally into NASA missions ever since. Even in the 1980s, we did unsupervised machine learning with NASA's Space Telescope data. So they had the Infrared Astronomical Survey mission, IRAS. We developed, with NASA, a new software called AutoClass for automatic classification, and it discovered a new class of elements times. And so every decade, we've been infusing these kinds of AI solutions into operational use with NASA missions. Next. For today, I'm going to focus on Earth AI. So applications of geospatial artificial intelligence for Earth. And we primarily focus on government data. So the United States, Europe, Japan, other countries spend billions of dollars to put satellites into orbit, produce data, release it as open data, and then often open source software to go along with the data, and then help people put it into operational use. And so, but what's happened in the last couple of years is this new type of geospatial AI foundation model, which we'll get into. And so the key thing is to not just have the data, but actually get it out there helping communities and having it benefit people and countries. Next. So for about 20 years, USRA has been developing software solutions with NASA to help communities around the world take advantage of this satellite data. There was a project called Servir, which set up hubs in countries around the world, in Africa, in Latin America, elsewhere, to help them take advantage of satellite data for agriculture, for farmers, to avoid frost ruining their harvest, for emergency operators to help with disasters, for a whole range for air quality issues to help with public health, a whole portfolio of things. And in recent years, we've started to introduce artificial intelligence into this portfolio of applications. And we work with NASA, U.S. Geological Survey, Department of Energy, and EPA, EPA project currently, and then also with JAXA, our main sponsors for this work. Next slide. So I'll go through just a few highlights of things that we're actually presenting advancements at AGU this year. So one is a project on water monitoring. So USGS is really great. One of their mission areas is called water resources. And so we have a cooperative research agreement with them. We work with them on a range of things. And they have the stream gauges that are across the country. And when there's a hurricane coming, they'll even rapidly deploy more stream gauges. But those are just point measurements of stream flows. And so sometimes you need to actually survey the surface of the water, get velocity vector fields. If there's an oil spill, you want to know where there's eddies that might be capturing the oil, or just deploy drones, go capture imagery, and tell me what the velocities are of this rapidly rising river and stream. And so one of our USGS colleagues invented a software system called Trivia, where from moving aircraft, you get video of the streams, and then you stitch it all together, you analyze it, and you create these velocity vector fields of it. And so we've converted that into Python, and there was one key part of it that was a bottleneck, which was mapping the boundary of the stream to then apply this, what's called particle image velocimetry. It's kind of a technical thing, but, and so we used Meta's SAM2 model for mapping the boundaries. And that was now it's a fully automated process without this manual step in there. And so that the emergency operators can get the data more quickly from the video streams off of the moving aircraft. That's one, and there's a talk on Wednesday. Next. We also support the USGS has the natural hazards mission area. And so we do work on landslides, earthquakes, floods, wildfires, a whole range of things. On earthquakes, USGS came up with the Shake Alert system. So if you have an Android phone or you have an Apple phone, and you ever get an earthquake alert, that is powered by the data coming from Shake Alert. And so the job is not done. We got to keep improving the Shake Alert system. And so there's the earthquake scientists, there's the people that operate it 24/7, 365, and then we have a team of data scientists helping to work with those earthquake scientists, develop new algorithms that improve the performance of the Shake Alert system, and then it gets handed off to the 24/7, 365. And so there's a talk later this afternoon even on the key part of GPS of earthquake early warning is the GPS signals that capture the ground movements, and there can be errors in GPS. And so you hear a little bit about space weather, which is one of the big causes of GPS errors. I think last year there was an example where GPS was off by more than 230 feet during planting season that cost Midwest farmers more than $500 million. And so part of what you'll hear from Sujit is this new space weather model. Still a long ways to go to get it to benefit farmers, but that's another use case there. Next. We do also National Weather Channel. We do work on weather forecasting with machine learning and neural networks. So one project we've had with the Department of Energy and NASA is to do a neural network approach to forecast weather for aviation. And so with aviation, we need to know not just weather as it's going to hit the ground, but we need to know it at very high resolution in altitude. And so one of the things that causes climate warming is condensation trails. And there's debate about how much effect this has, but the literature says that it's on the same order of magnitude, which seems surprising, but on the same order of magnitude as the emissions from aviation engines. And so there's some interest among airlines to be able to mitigate condensation trails by rerouting aircraft in ways that don't produce them in areas that would actually contribute to climate warming. And so we've got a system, we developed a system, we trained a model on some very unique set of NASA data that forecasts weather 6 hours into the future at very good resolution in altitude, and produced looking at historical data, we were able to forecast these regions that will produce persistent contrails with what's called an F1 score of 0.8, which is a measure of true positives, false negatives. It's kind of it's an artificial intelligence method for measuring the quality of your machine learning models. Next chart. So the biggest project we've been on, that Sujit is the AI lead for, we have 5 people that work on the project, is the Prithvi Earth Observation 2 foundation model. And this model is receiving the AGU Open, the team that produced this model is receiving the AGU Open Science Recognition Prize this year for this work. The paper that Sujit led with Daniela from IBM came out last week in IEEE. And I'm listing just a few of the talks there where USRA personnel are co-authors. There's many more. If you search in AGU for Prithvi, you'll find many talks that either are by people on the Prithvi team or by people not on the Prithvi team who are using the Prithvi model. Next chart, please. And so a really novel thing about this is historically, for decades really, we've been building machine learning models for specific uses. So if we want to recognize flood inundation, we build a model for flood inundation. If we want to track wildfires, we build a model for wildfires. If we want to do a model, if we want to do something for agriculture, forecasting crop yields, we do a model for that. Well, what's really novel about the foundation models is now what you do is you take decades of global satellite data and you build a foundation model that finds all the correlations in the data without knowing anything about the downstream uses. And then you can fine tune it for multiple downstream uses. So in this case, for downstream uses related to disaster response, land cover, crop mapping, and ecosystem dynamics. And so once you've done this training, it's kind of like in parallel to what you've seen with the chat clients out there with large language models, which have been evolving over the last 8-9 years. You're seeing this now just in the last few years with these geospatial AI foundation models. And the project, project is led by NASA, and in particular, the NASA Impact Team. Next. So here, yeah, go ahead.
Question, sorry, just for a clarification, which probably everybody here understands. Could you just give a line description of what the Prithvi Earth modeling is? Maybe
sorry.
Maybe
Go back one.
Yeah, just what it is.
So
that you won the prize for.
Okay, so NASA developed a Landsat series of satellites.
Europe when it launched.
Okay, fantastic. And Europe has Sentinel-2. And so Europe and the US have harmonized the data from Landsat and Sentinel into the harmonized Landsat Sentinel-2 data set. So you have this beautiful data set that's global. And historically, the government's role is to design the satellites, launch them, release the data, make the data available to everyone. So they have all of these data distribution centers. But now the amazing thing is the government's saying, let's go a step further. And let's develop a foundation model of this harmonized Landsat Sentinel data set. That then the people that want to use the data and actually do the productive things with it, they don't have to build their own machine learning models from it. They can take this one that's been developed by the government and then they can take even our fine-tuned models, or they can fine-tune it for their own uses. And Sujit will talk a bunch about how all these other users have picked it up.
So will you also address not just that you have access to these data and you're using them, but some of the big picture questions you're answering about the Earth? And
Sujit will even show you some examples of, so, there's just like when the chat services came out, they tested against math, chemistry, biology, SATs, college admissions, right? And so they kept driving up their performance on all of these different metrics. The same thing is being applied to these geospatial foundation models where these benchmark task suites. And so this Prithvi model has been tested against benchmarks and its performance compared against the performance of other models.
But what questions are you answering? Or Sujit, just what's one question that you're answering about the dynamic of the planet?
Dynamics, I mean,
Or just the
Well,
map,
if you-
if I had
you go to the
to
next chart.
talk to the
Sorry.
public and say, this is what the big questions that are being answered, what's one?
So you want to know what's the latest, where is flood? How far is the flood going?
Okay,
What's the flood boundary? Where is the flood? So you want to know where the flood is. Or where's this? So another one, wildfire scar. So the wildfires come through, where's the burned area? Or next one, burn scar intensity. So you've got where the scar was, but then what was the intensity of the damage to it? So that then when the recovery teams come in, they can give differential treatment depending on the damage. Landslide detection, to know where they are. A lot of them happen in unpopulated areas. But also then, we do see landslides, especially after in California. You have fires, which take away trees, then you have rains, which we have debris flows, and also then there's landslide risk.
okay, that's really clear, thank you. You did mention some of those, I just didn't see how it all fit together, but
The
now.
crop mapping one, you can detect which crops are planted in which fields. And so, for sometimes local and state governments want to know that there's certain incentives that are given to people, either that they've planted or maybe they haven't planted. Also, if you're having models then that go and predict the crop yields for different counties and things, you want to know what the actual crops that have been planted are. And then there's some ecosystem dynamics, dynamic ones of, for carbon sequestration and production. So next, and so on the right, Sujit will go into this in more detail. This is just showing, and just like with, the size of the large language models has gone up exponentially over the last number of years. And the size of these geospatial AI foundation models is also going up exponentially. And so this latest one is 600 million parameters, is quite large. And so the blue was showing that the performance of the Prithvi model compared against the other models that the benchmark was compared against. And then one way we're working to operationalize this is to go even a step further. So now you give the data, you give the foundation model. And now we're working on the agentic workflows that go with those. So for each individual end use case of, say, local government or state government or a farmer, we're now starting to integrate those into this open Earth AI chat platform, where we have the data in the back, we have the foundation in the back, and now we're starting to add these agentic workflows so that if someone can come in and give a prompt and say, hey, I want to know for this county, if I'm planting corn with this fertilization plan, and and you get the weather forecast. So it pulls in the weather forecast, the planting plan, the fertilization plan, and then it forecasts crop yield for you and gives you the results for this chat. And so we're starting to work on those kinds of specific workflows that would support specific and end use communities and end users. Next. And so we are looking for partners. We think it's a great nonprofit mandate for the benefit of humanity that we're working on to make this available broadly, both locally, state level, within the United States, but also then beyond the borders of the United States. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Sujit. Sujit's the AI lead. We support Sujit on the AI part for the foundation model work. And he'll talk about in more detail the Prithvi model and also more.
Thank you, David. So go ahead. So I'm going to talk about the Prithvi EO model first. The EO stands for Earth Observation, and Prithvi is a Sanskrit word for Earth, right? So this was the first model that we created as a foundation model. It started in 2022. And then in that first attempt, what we tried to do was all of these, large language models were at the rise, right? You look at the potential of ChatGPT and everything that was there that, okay, they can help you do certain tasks. But this was not applied to in terms of the domain of the vision for, looking at application, which can serve day-to-day life, right? So the idea was that, okay, can we take the same approach and can we apply it on a vision model, which can operate on satellite data? So the first idea that came up was in 2022, and they tried it on HLS just based on the US CONUS region. It was just trained on 1 year of data set of 2017 on HLS, and this partnership was done between NASA and IBM. And we created that model, and then we released it. After that, we saw a quite rise in the adaptation of that model. So if you go to the next slide. So if you look at it, there was a huge rise in the adaptation after Prithvi EO, and the community uptake was pretty higher. Then we released last year in 2024 a Prithvi EO version 1, which is trained on the global HLS dataset. So it is now trained on global dataset, what we have acquired, not only on US CONUS region, and over all the last 7 years of global, HLS have been operational for the dataset. So then we tried to test it on multiple application and downstream. The whole approach was taken to make the science, make it open science project. And so whatever research we did in terms of our code bases, our papers, and our models, they were all open sourced on Hugging Face, and codes were on the GitHub for people to download the models and use the data. And so this was the first model that was actually done on the HLS dataset, which is 30-meter resolution. Before that, there were a couple of models which were just working on pixel basis or some other resolutions. And then we had more of a temporal repeat cycle. So we included time to look at how the changes is happening related to Earth, and then incorporate that. So to our surprise, it came to be like when we released the model, we had certain application, and it was a cross collaboration between the AI folks. Obviously that, we can't just do all of the things our own. We need scientific, science experts on this one. So we had a good amount of collaboration from, USRA, we had from the Clark University, we had from Arizona State University, we have from Boston University. All of these SMEs were the majorly remote sensing people. Came together, and then they provided ideas on what it can be used for. They had the downstream examples and adaptation that they looked at, and they started testing it. And then we saw more than 15 plus different adaptation of Prithvi, but people actually used it for real life application. Like one of the application was in Africa for locust breeding. Somebody used, then we had another application that people used for disaster mapping and stuff. So it was beyond our group itself. So it gave a huge validation in terms of the, the capability of the model, and it can, bring in. After that, we saw a huge surge in amount of geospatial foundation model in terms of increasing modality and everything coming into the, into the scientific domain. We can go to the next one. So here is an aggregated performance of the Prithvi foundation model when we initially released it, and last year as well. We benchmarked against the other models which were in the domain, and the Prithvi performance in 30-meter resolution was superior to major of them, and specifically on looking at the task which involve classification or segmentation. Like, can you draw me looking at a simple landscape? Can you give me a mask of the flooded region? Looking at landscape, can you give me a mask of the burn scar? Looking at the can you tell me which crop it is? Can you, if my satellite has been disrupted or I cannot see the landscape due to the cloud, and can you fill up those gaps? But what my satellite would have seen if the cloud is not there. So they're like big sort of imputation problem that you're trying to solve without using, utilizing the power of AI there. Can we go to the next one? So these are a couple of visuals that you can see from the top. So these are the images that you get generally from the HLS data set on the top row, and the bottom is what the model predicts in terms of the mask. So when you overlay them, you can exactly see the affected regions and everything for the flood areas and other stuff. You go to the next one. Here is like the flood mapping for the two color composite. And you in the middle, what you see is the ground truth, which is drawn by the people, in the research domain. And this on the right hand side is the predictor mask from the model itself, which seems reasonably well in terms of looking at the this composite of the model.
Can you pause and just answer the question of like what time intervals we're talking about? So the model predicted the map on the right
Yes.
before there were like boots on the ground mapping it, what we see.
Yeah, so this is a validation. So what you do is, for validation testing, what we did was we took some data out, which we never showed to the model. And we just gave them the left image that you look at it. It is 6 bands of HLS, red, green, blue, NIR, SUR, and SWIR2. So model just sees this. And then we ask the model that give me the affected region of the flood on this map. And then model created their far right one, which is the predicted maps. Then we compared it to the hand-drawn, or you can call it the mask, which was done by the experts, that, okay, what were the flood region? And then we compared the accuracy and performance based on that. So how close was the model compared to the human or the real validation that was there from the subject matter expert?
It's a prediction, not a forecast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we go to the next one? Similarly, we tried to look at for the burn scar mapping as well. So after a forest fire, you can look at, this was the left-hand side was given to the model. The far right model predicted, and the middle is compared to the ground truth, which people have already marked out. So the model does reasonably perform well compared to the ground truth, what experts have provided, and the results and everything. Can we go to the next? So this was a very interesting study that we came across 2 weeks ago. So this is one of the example of how Prithvi Earth observation was adapted. So this is the first adaptation of any geospatial foundation model to be in orbit. So another group of researchers from Philab in Italy and stuff, they used the Prithvi EO model. They distilled down, which means that you're fundamentally making the model smaller so that it can utilize less computation. And they put it on ISS, International Space Station, for imaging. So and this became the first geospatial foundation model able to be in orbit to be utilized. I think last week, I saw a huge, this uproar about a language model also, which they try to train in the foundation model, in terms of the in the orbit itself. So these things actually give you more capability inside that we can deploy these models into the orbit, and you're able to utilize them real time. You can actually do a lot of advanced forecasting as well as predictions in the real time for the situations. Can we go to the next one? So this is a simple example of the community uptake onto this model. This is a very standard, the metric that generally AI folks would like to showcase that how much my model has been used till now and everything. So the Prithvi EO models overall has been downloaded more than 300,000 times. So they have been used by so many researchers and in the domain for their own study or for application development, or maybe other startups trying to build on the top of Prithvi, or other researchers trying to build on top of Prithvi by adding more modalities or more data to it. So you get on the right-hand side, you see the same thing with the different model uptake by the community itself. So Prithvi EO in a nutshell became one of the first geospatial foundation model to be open source and trained on 30-meter native HLS data set, which has so much a huge community uptake, and for which we are getting the AG Open Science Award this year for this one as well. Thank you. Can you go to the next one? So now moving on to the other part of the observation, right? So now moving on to when you're looking at those were the images that you see from satellite. Now the question comes for the weather forecasting. So this is another foundation model that we released last year in August, which was Prithvi WXC. So it is weather and climate. So what we did was we trained the model onto the Meta-2 variables. Can we go to the next one? So this was like a reanalysis data set, which is available from NASA, and it is on 50 degree, 1.5 degrees. So it's from the 50-kilometer resolution that we have got data for. And then we pre-trained the model on this one. Now, pre-training means that you train it once, and then, which is the same as foundation model, you train it once and then let other people use it. For example, like ChatGPT, or you use Gemini, right? So this has been trained once by Google and everybody, but they give out the inference pipeline for each one of you or to use it through your account. So we trained it once, and then we utilize this model to see how this model does well in terms of the zero-shot forecasting, which is I'm not going to tell my model or give any more data to fine-tune it. Just tell me off the bat, how does it perform? So initially, we look at reanalysis, you do the pre-training, you get foundation model. Now, if you go to the next slide, you will see the zero-shot evaluation of the Hurricane Laura and Hurricane Ian. On the bottom, you have on the left-hand side is the ground truth, and on the right-hand side, you have the prediction. You can see the model follows very, accurately the track of the hurricane, and also was able to predict in advance for the hurricane of these themes. So this showed the potential of looking at this model from the forecasting point of view and showing that, okay, these models can do really well in terms of doing the forecasting for extreme events like hurricane or something like that. But then the question came up that, okay, it's fine that you can do for, hurricane forecasting or weather event forecasting that we did for approximately 10 days in advance into the future. So you will take one initial condition, which is currently at time 0, and you will keep giving the model same output by model itself and ask to forecast the weather for the next 10 days. Why it is important compared to the traditional, NWP systems, this makes it much faster. So what you're doing is you're actually making these faster, maybe 4,000 times compared to the standard methods. So what is happening? So your inferencing takes seconds to generate all those 10 days, whereas, or a couple of, just a couple of minutes to get all 10 days compared to the standard NWP methods, which takes hours and any simulation and everything, and, thousands of CPUs to generate that. Now, if you go to the next one. So this is one of the another study that we tried to look at from the parameterization point of view. This was done with the Stanford University, and this was related to the gravity wave flux. Now, this is not gravity as in gravity, it's a gravity wave. So it is like a microscale process that you look at it. So it is a model representation of process, which is essential for the global circulation. And more of it, you're looking at a planetary budget, energy budget and other stuff. So all of those things gets covered by this one. So we did some study on this one, and we showed it for the first time that a foundation model trained on this sort of resolution can be adapted to feed into the climate models as well, and which can be utilized for larger purposes or, getting into the parameterization of the climate models. We go to the next one. So this is our very recent model, actually, which we released this year, right? So it goes a sequence as for my career at the, leading the team as well. So this year we released Surya, and this was the first foundation model which was released for heliophysics in the native SDO data resolution. I'll tell you why it was a big deal. Because when you look at the SDO data or the sun, generally we have seen a lot of data for the Earth. You have so much well coverage and everything. For the heliophysical sun, you don't have that much well coverage, right? So you're looking at the data, and it is a very high resolution data. You're looking at 4096 by 4096 for each wavelength of the sun that you're trying to capture. So training a model for that, knowing that, okay, 90% of the information, what you know about sun, you actually don't know. 10% is the only known information. So how do you train a model to do the forecasting or something like that? And can we actually utilize this for something like solar flare or some, for those events? So we trained the model in SEO data. Now, yeah. So this was one of the experiments we tried to test the Surya on, and if it can be utilized. And if we take up the, inversion of training a foundation model like Surya on a higher resolution, then we can enable other SMD or, other AI researchers to utilize the same model and do the further study for the heliophysics or make some forecasting or some applications for space Earth, interaction or weather programs. If you go to the next one. So this shows one of the forecasts from the Surya model itself. It is one of the channel, obviously, from, so it is looking at the magnetosphere of the sun, HMI. And what you see on the, so these are the active regions of the sun. When you look at it, they're the forecasted state from the model itself. So now looking at the previous data of the solar time steps, we were able to predict what the sun should look like in a couple of hours as well. Now, this was for the first time anybody, I think from my best of my knowledge in the domain of generative AI, nobody has done that before. We were the first time we've looked at it from the heliophysics domain as well. Now, if you go to the next one, you will see that this was the first time we tried to see and forecast solar flare, how it would flare up at the sun. So on the left-hand side is the ground, output from the model. On the right-hand side is the ground truth. So we provided the model with 2 time steps, which was 2 hours before the event. And we asked the model to give me the 2 hours after if the sun is going to flare up or not, depending on the active region. So this is the first time step, which is an hour after the initial condition, the model seen. So right is the ground truth and the left is the output. You can see the model has correctly depicted what the output should look like compared to the ground truth. Now, if you go to the next one, so you do the second hour. So it captures the flaring up as well pretty well in terms of the, solar flare events. So as far as we were working with a lot of heliophysicists in this domain as well from, CSPAR, USGS, and then we had from City Institute and other places. So for them, it was the first time they actually saw in terms of the generative AI the capability to forecast a solar flare. Actually, not forecasting. They have been doing forecasting from the machine learning perspective, but visually looking at the sun flare up from the generative perspective.
So the on the right is the forecast, and on the left.
On the left is the forecast from the model. On the right is what you actually observed on the sun. So after it is the real image of the sun. So if you did not have the right-hand side, you can still trust the left because it is, almost mimicking the right-hand side by looking at that one.
And if you didn't have AI involved, how far could humans go in actually forecasting?
So without generative modeling capacity, we have not come across any literature which actually does this. So you can use standard machine learning techniques, but without AI, no. Maybe very well-trained heliophysicists. Again, this will be like, I don't want to touch that domain, but they can tell. I don't think anybody can tell. If they would be able to tell which part of the sun is going to flare up, then they can exactly launch rockets focusing on those specific active regions where they will flare up. But that's an active area of research. And that's what we were told, that heliophysics is very different than what you're looking at Earth. It's not, you do not have that many observations and everything to decipher everything. You know approximately 5% of what goes on there compared to what what you don't know. So there is a lot of ambiguity there. So in a general statement, if I tell that I don't think any heliophysicist can just look at the sun and say that, okay, it's going to flare up next moment. If that would be happening, we would not have this satellite outage problem. Everybody would have done that. So this actually marks the first time that we are able to see the flaring up. But with the machine learning techniques, we can also tell approximately 12 hours ahead that, okay, there is going to be solar flare or not. So which is a major, upgrade on that one. Go to the next one, please. That would be it actually from my side in terms of covering it. I'll pass it on to Disha, because she will talk about one of the applications to the Prithvi as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Disha. I'm a researcher at USRA Reacts, and my work with Prithvi primarily involved developing and implementing the building damages downstream task. Next slide, please. So damage inspections following natural disasters are manual, they're slow, and they delay vital aid by a critical 24 to 48 hours. So our mission was to leverage Prithvi to fully automate this time-sensitive process. We trained Prithvi to ingest a pre-disaster and post-disaster image, identify the building footprints in the pre-disaster image, and then evaluate the extent of damages for each building in the post-disaster image. We used an ordinal scale to evaluate this damage, so ranging from no damage, minor damage, major damage to destroyed. So a key challenge for this building damages task was cross-resolution generalization. So sub-meter resolution imagery is really required for building damage assessments. And as Sujit previously mentioned, Prithvi itself is pre-trained on the NASA HLS-2 satellite imagery data set. And that data set is medium resolution, roughly 30 meters per pixel. We needed to prove that our model could apply the knowledge that it obtained from this medium resolution data set and the pre-training process to sub-meter resolution imagery. Next slide, please. So the key innovation of this building damages work was that we were able to successfully fine-tune the model to leap across that huge resolution gap. The model successfully applied the learnings from the medium resolution HLS-2 dataset to sub-meter resolution building damages imagery, and Prithvi performed exceptionally well across the diverse disaster types seen in the XVD benchmark dataset, achieving a multi-class F1 score of 0.97. And as David mentioned, that's just a metric of accuracy and how well the model is performing. So this success really validates the core hypothesis of the Prithvi project, that large-scale general-purpose pre-training creates highly reliable models for specialized high-impact tasks. So the transfer learning showcase here indicates that Prithvi can be quickly adapted for many other critical applications, and it already has been, as Sujit and David both discussed. Ultimately, for the task of assessing building damages following a natural disaster, Prithvi enables near real-time automated damage estimation. By generating these highly accurate analyses in minutes, not days, we ensure resources are allocated faster and aid reaches people earlier, ultimately saving lives. So the Prithvi Foundation model is truly AI that benefits humanity.
Is the second part been tested yet, where you actually get emergency resources to the, is that in theory or is that actually?
It's not out there yet. I mean, this is a very new downstream task that it wasn't even part of the Prithvi EO2 paper.
Yeah, I think these are the couple of applications. So it's a, same thing. So we are still validating, and we are, making it available on to the different open source platform for the people to test it out and utilize it. And then from there, I think the performance can further be tuned based on the real data set, other data set that we gather from there, and it can be utilized in those operations. Yes.
The real data set being a real disaster, a real.
I'm like, these are real disasters, which happened in the past, but it's more of like you will have more of a tuned atmosphere for the operations to work, and then you can definitely these models are capable enough to be operationalized and provide that. But those part needs to be worked upon, the linking all of the disaster response from there.
Is it, or the other reported, is it just, I'll just keep going, okay. When you talk about the data that it's using to predict building damage, is it taking into consideration what the building materials are of the different buildings? Like what are the actual?
It's just extremely high resolution, 0.8 meters per pixel.
Okay, so they can tell you if it's concrete or if it's wood or what the structure will be, because that have. But David's shaking his head, no.
No, it's just the pre-disaster image and then the post-disaster image, and we ask the model based off of the building footprints in the pre-disaster image, how much damage was done to each of these buildings based on the post-disaster image.
So like think about a wildfire.
See what will happen to those buildings if category 5 hits.
It's after the fact.
It's after the fact.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then why is the model, Prithvi, why is it so nimble? Why can it be applied? What about it is its strength that it can be applied to so many different situations?
I think that goes into the
source data is really great to begin with.
Okay.
Global, what the government calls high resolution, medium resolution. And then the foundation model is finding all of the correlations in the data independent of all downstream uses. So it's generic for all those downstream uses. It's finding those correlations.
So Prithvi is interested in the data. It doesn't care so much about the questions you're asking.
Doesn't know about
interested in crunching and looking for patterns.
Exactly.
It's essentially able to learn in that pre-training process, right? When we're ingesting all of that HLS2, the 4.2 million satellite images to create the foundation model, it's learning the spatial representations, the temporal representations of the imagery itself, and then applying it to your particular task.
So you can imagine it in a very simple and layman terms. If I put you in a room, right? And I remove everything, and I just throw you, fill this room with different images and puzzles and everything. And I say that there is a potential that all of these images are linked to each other somehow, right? And you have 1 year to figure this out, right? Let you be the Sherlock Holmes. So you can be like, let you be the Sherlock Holmes, and you're trying to figure out all the relationship. By the end of the year, let's potentially say that you will have a map in your mind that how these images are related to each other, even if you don't know what the context is about, right? So you can imagine the same way this model is being trained. You look at a bunch of data sets for 7 years. You're looking at all those pixels related to green pixels, related to, muddy pixels, different values. And the model will be like in its mind map that, hey, I think I can put them in this cluster. For example, you can take images of oranges, apples, banana, and you don't know about what's the name, right? But you can say that, okay, it looks like round and orange. I'll put it like in a different cluster. Now, later on, I tell you that, okay, if you look at this image and this is an orange, now quickly in your mind, you will be like, okay, all those clusters belong to orange, right? So you can easily decipher what were the correlation that you understood in your mind, looking at all those patterns, results in that label. So this is how the Prithvi or any other foundation model is generally trained. You train in a strategy to model to fill up the gaps or maps so that the model learns the correlation between each and every pixel and understand what to pay attention to, what not to pay attention to, and then it creates an embedding space. And later on, we just take the same model which I've learned before, and we just show them a couple of examples of like, okay, this is what flood looks like, this is what burn scar looks like, this is what crop looks like in terms of like rice looks like, this is what forest looks like, and the model like, okay, bam, I know, okay, exactly, this is rice, this is flood and everything. So you don't require that much huge amount of data and compute, which you utilize in traditional machine learning to create one native application on the flood map. So instead of now utilizing this many data, you will be like, okay, I just need 5 samples to tell the model that I've done with this one.
But a question, let's talk about droughts. Because you have a different time frame for, let's say, when a drought hits, it might be a few months, it might be a few years. And then let's say we get data from GRACE, and then you have the, let's say, natural humidity on the surface. How do you predict the situation over here?
So that becomes a forecasting problem. So it's like looking at the temporal data, right? So Prithvi EO, for example, is pre-trained on a temporal data as well. It has for trained per time step. You're looking month apart, approximately months to 6 months apart in each sample. So model can know that there is a relation between I'm looking at this patch on the earth, and I'm also looking at another again this patch on the earth. This can be a month apart or can be 6 months apart, but this is how the space evolution looks like. Similar like in weather forecasting, you look at the state of atmosphere and you're like, okay, this is the next hour, this is the next hour, this is the next hour. So in the same fashion, when you want to utilize it for drought purposes, something, you will use that data set in temporal fashion to build that data set where you say that model, okay, these were the couple of initial time steps for the model to look like, and then the drought happened, right? So now the model will learn from its own what it had learned before. It will apply the same knowledge here and try to retrieve any new information that it can get. And then it will be able to tell you that, okay, this is the forecasting condition for drought.
And what we're starting to work on is where we have these individual foundation models, but then, you need them to work in concert with each other, weather forecasting model with landmass observation. So the satellites look at different things, landmass, oceans, atmosphere. And so at the moment, these foundation models are, a single large data set, harmonized Landsat Sentinel-2 in this case. We've done one of these foundation models with GOES, Himawari, UMETSAT, and the NOAA JPSS for this aviation use case on weather forecasting. So we're starting to see these things evolve, and it's going to be interesting to see how it evolves so that, the way that you've seen the large language models evolve as more and more data gets in there, and you're actually able to have these. Right now, we're starting with agentic workflows that can take inputs and outputs from these different geospatial.
Disha, I noticed your before and after for your disaster response are clear cloud-free images.
Oh.
Do you need, can cloud, say after a tornado, nighttime tornado, the next day it's still cloudy, do you have to wait for the clouds to get out of the way?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But I can tell you, like the Weather Service, to rate a tornado, they have to go out to the site, physically do it. Sometimes they can't go the next day if the weather's bad. It can take a long time. And then they can't get grasp for a big tornado, for example, the whole event, with the statistics. But a news company, if you had a clear image the next day, to be able to quickly, at least even if it's preliminary, 82 homes severely damaged, 112, partial damage, something like that, and you cross-reference that with, home values or whatever, and come out with these.
We talked about that too.
Yeah, that, yeah, and then that can also draw attention to help to
exactly.
get those numbers out quickly, to get aid in there or donations and everything else. So, be very interested if you could provide that information, after an event.
Yeah. I mean, that is the plan.
Yeah.
So one of the first workflows we're putting into this Earth AI chat is the building damage one. So
Yeah.
maybe we'll reach out to you for some
Definitely.
detailed feedback on what would be
All the layers.
What
Yeah.
would be valuable to
the
you.
most useful way to present the results.
Yeah.
Are there questions in the synthesis of all this data that you still need a human for? Meaning, is there a kind of analysis of just the human, this isn't a question of like, where's the human in all of this, but in some ways it is, that the computer, even the large language models at this point can't answer, that you still need somebody there to be able to, I don't know, assess or synthesize the data in a way that a computer can't do it.
Oh,
So there are two parts to this one. So one, generally, I'd categorize these models as, human with AI. I generally tend to go in that direction. It's not one versus the other sort of
Right, so
situation
still
at
a
any time.
tool.
Yeah, it is still a tool. It is always a tool to help you, right? Until these models can plan themselves, right? Which is a far-fetched goal right now. It's not going to happen I don't think, unless, in next couple of years or 4 years. Like these models can plan themselves based on the hypothesis and everything. We have seen a couple of researchers in terms of the AI scientists and other stuff, which have been done in language model. But there is a very different context when you try to look at from language. I'll consider it to be a bit simpler than looking at the vision itself because of semantic analysis and everything that you construct from language. In vision, it's very difficult. So obviously, it is a tool which can help you to enable a lot of things, but there are miles to go before it can be, it can automate itself we can automate itself in terms of taking care of a lot of processes, but it can make the job much easier. For example, instead of lots of human labeling out completely every day for flood mapping, it's a huge human research task. I can give you a map, which is a potential label, and you just go with a click of a button that you accept it or reject it or modify the boundary. It saves you a lot of time in that situation, right?
It sounds like you have a lot of idle graduate students, though. Isn't that what they're supposed to do?
Yeah, I'll not be able to tell that. Maybe there are other companies, but yeah, these data sets that what we used are already publicly available data sets for all of these, and the research labs and the stuff, they had this data set prepared. But definitely, in order to make it, to utilize it further, the only major advantage here is that you don't require those thousands of images to fine tune the model. You can just get away with, 50, 100 or 500 with a reasonable performance, depending on how much trade-off you're ready to accept.
Do you think it could answer questions or discover phenomena that you're not anticipating?
That's a very good question, but that is more of a research question right now. But that's what the planning is about. Yeah. So that's what we call it, like you can plan or not. For example, given an atmospheric initial condition, you tell the model, okay, can you create a hurricane for me? Yeah. Does model know all the possibilities of creating a hurricane, right? So it needs to understand the whole atmosphere. But then there's a lot of uncertainty there because you are not capturing every single instances which is there in the atmosphere itself. So there's going to be a gap in what model produce currently to what you're observing, right? So that will be the situation. But we are far from that right now, from that perspective. Definitely a couple of years. Yeah, we keep seeing that the AGI and other stuff, but it is a bit far from that situation right now in terms of that planning part.
And just to build on the answer to your question about humans, when
those guys,
when there is a wildfire,
yeah,
a burned area emergency response team gets formed, a bear team, and so there's certain things that they do. This can help them. But it's just one piece of a portfolio of things that are done in response to these kinds of situations. So, there's a lot involved in these things. This is just the data is one piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Any last questions for our USRA panelists?
I always have another question.
We didn't catch what's your affiliation, sorry?
Well, I produce a radio show called Big Picture Science. It's a national radio show. And so after this concludes, I will want to follow up with an interview recorded. But in the case of heliophysics, are you refining the questions then that the scientists ask, or are you making them obsolete at some point?
Not obsolete, definitely not. Because the questions are generally asked by humans only, right? Right now, I don't think any model out there is capable enough to ask the question on its own and form the new statements or hypothesis, depending on, again, that is a bit in the gray area, but we'll know. But in this case, in heliophysics, the primary goal was firstly to look at this thing and can we do something related to space weather forecasting, like solar flare, something, which is a major disruptor when it comes to satellite, GPS, and other stuff, right? So first thing that can we make that accurate? If we can make that accurate, and we can, then we can actually save millions of dollars in those things, and in terms of the satellite going off, GPS going off, something like that. That's the primary thing that we're looking at. But obviously, these models, when you train on these large sequences, there are potential that they will help you to discover new scientific principle potentially, right? It's again with a bit of hysterics mark conditions apply, but it's that situation that it can. But you need to dig the questions further in terms of the modeling, that what do these model learns, right? What it is learning on the fly, and then, how evolved the embedding space is, or like, that space of the search is for the model to think. And then you will frame questions accordingly to query that.
And just to build on your question, so there's the science of it,
Yeah.
and then there's the earth action. And so I'll do a shout out to Alcid, our CEO. So he led space weather at NOAA for the last 7 or so years, and then prior to that, NASA headquarters chief scientist for heliophysics. And so when he came on board, we took a strong interest in space weather forecasting. So space weather, this is forecasting weather at the sun.
Right.
Then that weather transmits all the way to orbit to the Earth, which starts to affect satellites in orbit with atmospheric drag. And then when it gets to the surface, that example for farmers, where they happened to plant when there was a strong GPS deviation of 230 feet, that caused them to lose 500 million in crops with precision ag. Precision ag relies on GPS, which relies on the satellites, which are affected by space weather. And so we want to do that entire chain with these types of models to get to the Earth action aspects for farmers, for transportation. The GPS we rely on when we're driving, but GPS is all over, and communications that can cause radio blackouts too. So we want to get the advanced notice all the way from the sun to forecast hours into the future, to then look at the atmospheric drag. Starlink had an example where they lost $40 million, 38 of 49 satellites that they launched. They lost because they misjudged the space weather. And so they misjudged the atmospheric drag, and they didn't launch them high enough to achieve stable orbit. And so then they lost. So we want to get all the way from the sun to Lagrange 1 around Earth. You get the Earth's rotation, then you see when it's hitting that point and then hits the Earth, the effects, and be able to help people on the ground with this Earth action.
Mhm.
So there's a long way to go, but it's a phenomenal starting point to have this kind of level of accuracy at the sun itself.
All right, well, we're running out of time, so I
Thank you
want
so
to
much.
thank our panelists. If you have more questions, want a follow-up interview, Sarai is here to help you arrange that, or you can reach out to us at news tomorrow morning. If you like space weather, NASA will be back talking about 6 Helio missions that launched this year. They have first results from IMAP and Punch. The IMAP team will be back at 1 p.m. to answer more questions. And the Arctic report card is at 11 a.m. So we'll see you
From
tomorrow
hot to
morning.
cold.
What's that?
From hot to cold.
Yes, exactly. We're gonna do all
And we
the
appreciate
bullshit.
it here in person.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want to do an interview?
If